Nepotism comes in all shapes and sizes, but in Hollywood, it's almost certain to be accompanied by some form of drugs, booze, and general self-implosion. Whether it's family dynasties or just a name as a brand, sometimes they just have that heel rock level crash out.
You shut your mouth, fatty. The Rock will come out there and slap the herpes off your lips.
Nepo-Babies are a special breed of self-destruction, though, because they're generally shielded by the pedigree they're born with. In the portraits we're about to paint of 4 top-tier stories of Hollywood nepotism, you'll see a pattern of personal ruin, resurrection, and above all, family names and legacy that help prop them up while they're busy falling apart. So what exactly are we waiting for? Let's dive into the first person on this list, the winningest of them all. Charlie Sheen. Winning. Charlie Sheen was Hollywood's demolition derby on 2 legs, a man born into advantage and hell-bent on torching every ounce of it. His collapse wasn't the slow fade of a has-been or the tragic obscurity of an actor who never got a shot. Nah, his story's so fucking crazy, it's impossible to include everything in a 10-minute segment. I mean, this is the guy who bought hookers with traveler's checks and sent a well-established lady pimp to jail while getting off scot-free because of his Nepo privilege.
Haven't had ass in 3 days.
Sheen entered the industry already standing on the platform others have destroyed themselves to reach, and instead of building on it, he detonated it in front of a global audience.
Are there any drugs in this house?
If there
Put that down for a second.
If there are, you better find them and give them to me immediately.
Carlos Irwin Estevez was never destined for anonymity. His father, Martin Sheen, had carved out a reputation as one of the most respected actors of his era. Apocalypse Now became his legend, and from there he built a career of steady gravitas. But that legacy wasn't invincible. It was wrapped around Charlie from birth, making him Hollywood royalty, before he'd even learned how to read. His last name was an all-access pass. His father's reputation was more than a reference, it was a stamp of quality. Casting directors didn't look at Charlie like a stranger, they looked at him as an extension of a dynasty. Crazy how he went from that to having meme songs constructed out of his own quotes.
Some are saying that you're bipolar.
Wow, what does that mean?
I'm bi-winning, and I was banging 7-gram rocks.
While outsiders scraped together headshots and begged for auditions, Charlie was making short films in high school with Sean Penn and Rob Lowe. You wouldn't find Charlie hustling on the margins of Hollywood, no. He was growing up inside of it. His early years looked like the dream scenario for every ambitious kid in Los Angeles. Instant credibility, connections, and exposure to the very people who controlled the industry. Where others struggled for a chance, Charlie treated opportunities as normal, expected, and guaranteed. And so it went. The 1980s, or as I like to call it, Sheen's ascent. Platoon put him in the trenches of Vietnam cinema and launched him as a serious actor. Wall Street placed him opposite Michael Douglas and made him the face of corporate greed's impressionable sidekick. He also scored with Major League, a comedy that turned him into a cultural figure outside of the art house or drama crowd. By the end of the decade, Charlie Sheen was more than just Martin Sheen's son, he was a star in his own right, a leading man with credibility and charisma. Enough range to cross from Oscar-winning war films to sports comedies without sinking. But privilege has a way of eroding urgency. For Charlie, success never felt like survival. Success was an inevitability. When the industry rolls out the red carpet before you've earned it, discipline becomes, optional. You can miss meetings, indulge vices, push boundaries, all that bullshit, because the doors don't close when you behave badly. They just creak a little before swinging open again. Hollywood more than forgave this man's sins. In fact, they completely enabled them. The bad boy of Hollywood label became his second skin. In his 20s, the tabloids painted him as reckless and wild, the kind of actor who lived like his characters long after the cameras shut off. Lots of young actors were painted this way, so nobody thought much of it at first. Drugs, prostitutes, arrests, the usual. Just like some of his peers, none of it slowed his momentum. But his peers? They had nothing on this guy. If anything, all this shit just fed the legend. The press wanted a spectacle, and god damn it, Charlie delivered. He became proof that scandal sells as effectively as success. Producers kept hiring him, knowing audiences would tune in as much for the drama off-screen as for whatever he was shooting on camera. In fact, no one cared about what he was doing on camera. Hell, his own ex-wife thought he was in Dirty Dancing.
I love Dirty Dancing. I was a dancer growing up, so of course I remember him from that.
Just to make sure we're clear, he wasn't in Dirty Dancing.
This was the warped benefit of nepotism. Martin Sheen's respectability created a cushion. Charlie's family name made him untouchable longer than most. An unknown actor caught in half the scandals Charlie endured would have been banished to the direct-to-video graveyard. Charlie instead found his name in lights, again and again, because the Sheen brand carried built-in insurance. His father's reputation shielded him from exile, even as his own behavior screamed self-destruction. By the 1990s, the cracks widened, but it continued to not matter in the slightest. Charlie transitioned from dramatic credibility to lighter comedies and parodies. Hot Shots, The Three Musketeers, The Arrival. He even made this hilariously dopey Japanese cigarette commercial. These weren't disasters, but they didn't showcase depth. They showcased charm. Yeah, even that cigarette commercial. The industry leaned into his persona instead of challenging it. The box office remained decent, enough to justify his continued reign, but the artistic promise of Platoon and Wall Street was fading into memory. Hollywood wasn't watching a great actor in training, it was watching a party animal who happened to have leading man looks. Meanwhile, the scandals continued to escalate. Charlie developed a rap sheet: drug possession, assault accusations, domestic disputes, rehab, which became a revolving door. Instead of a phase, his wild lifestyle became the whole identity. The bad boy label hardened into a permanent warning sign, but the machine still found him useful. He was infamous, which meant he was valuable. Then came the turn that made his career explode in a way no one predicted: television. 2.5 Men, premiering in 2003, put Charlie Sheen back on top.
I don't know, man. I was banging 7-gram rocks and finishing them because that's how I roll. I have one speed, I have one gear. Go!
As Charlie Harper, who played a womanizing Malibu bachelor living in luxury and excess, a role so close to his real life that critics joked he wasn't acting at all, audiences certainly didn't care because the show was a smash hit. Ratings soared. Charlie became the highest paid actor on television, pulling in nearly $2 million per episode at the peak. Hollywood's prodigal debauchery-infused delinquent was now network TV's golden goose. But sitcom success most certainly didn't tame him. Instead, it supercharged the chaos. He never wanted to be a part of the show, and even admitted later on that no one with his issues should be given the amount of money he was offered. But they kept doing it anyway, with crazier, higher piles of cash until he would simply say yes. With that level of money and attention, his off-screen persona metastasized into full-blown tabloid obsession. Drug binges stretched into days-long benders. Police visits, rehab check-ins, and assault allegations piled up yet again. 2.5 Men turned into the strange backdrop for a meltdown the world couldn't stop watching. The dude was so unbelievably privileged he was bringing hookers to his home near the film set, and his ex-wife was making them sandwiches just to keep him tamed enough to film a scene. Let me say that again. His ex-wife was making his hookers sandwiches just so he could film a fucking scene. You know it's bad when the president warns against marrying you.
And I told the parents, don't let your daughter marry him.
He had a contentious relationship with his co-stars, to say the least, whose entire livelihood depended on if Charlie could get his shit together enough to say some lines. The dude would never show up to rehearsal, but then nail it on filming day. Probably one of the most frustrating things about him. He was goddamn talented, which helped him continue getting away with it all. This was the infamous Tiger Blood era. In 2011, Charlie went nuclear. Fired from his show after attacking its creator Chuck Lorre and simply not showing up to work, he launched a media tour of rants and unhinged interviews. Winning became his rallying cry. Tiger Blood, his mantra.
I have a different constitution, I have a different brain, I have a different heart, I have a different, I get tiger blood, man.
He spoke in manic tirades, branding himself a warlock, but I forgot about that. He spoke in manic tirades, branding himself a warlock powered by a different kind of DNA. The public devoured it. Twitter exploded with memes. YouTube looped his sound bites into remixes.
I blinked and I cured my brain. I have one speed, one gear, go.
Charlie Sheen wasn't an actor anymore. He was the internet's favorite clown. He tried to cash in on it. The Violent Torpedo of Truth tour was his attempt to monetize The Meltdown, a live show built around the energy of his manic persona. But fans expecting comedy or insight got incoherent rants, so audiences booed. Shows ended early. Tickets had to be refunded. The spectacle collapsed in front of everyone's faces. The very public that turned him into a meme wasn't interested in paying to watch the train wreck in person. They wanted him for free on Twitter, not at $80 a seat. That moment crystallized the transformation of celebrity scandal in the social media age. Charlie's meltdown wasn't tucked away in gossip columns. It was live-streamed, clipped, and memed in real time. He became one of the first celebrities to be consumed by the internet's hunger for absurdity. For months, you couldn't escape it. Every late-night monologue, every meme page, every news outlet mined his breakdown for content. He became the joke, the headline. And yet he played along, feeding the machine that was chewing him up. And the aftermath was brutal. CBS moved on, and Ashton Kutcher replaced him. Charlie tried to bounce back with FX's Anger Management, a series designed to recapture his sitcom magic, but it fizzled quickly. Without the novelty of 2.5 Men's platform, the act felt stale. The audience had seen The Meltdown. They didn't want to see the reheated version of the same shtick, and so the show collapsed under its own mediocrity. From there, Charlie's cultural footprint shrank. The public, once addicted to his chaos, moved on to fresher scandals, but what remained were the consequences. In 2015, Charlie revealed he was HIV positive, a diagnosis he had hidden for years under layers of denial and shame. He admitted to paying millions in hush money to keep it secret. The revelation sent shockwaves not only because of the illness itself, but because it underscored the depths of his recklessness. He'd slept with partners without disclosure. He gambled with lives. What had once looked like wild debauchery suddenly looked like criminally irresponsible. Adding to the storm were long-circulating rumors about his sexuality. Whispers about Charlie being secretly gay or bisexual followed him for decades.
I'm bi-winning.
Fed by accounts from sex workers, former partners, and Hollywood gossip, his hyper-heterosexual persona, the womanizer, the sex addict, the man drowning in models and porn stars, looked increasingly like overcompensation. Whether or not the rumors are true, they add another layer of tragedy to his story. A man so desperate to maintain an image that he buried any chance of authenticity under a mountain of cliches. His health struggles also reframed the spectacle. The manic energy of the Tiger Blood era looked less like rebellion and more like a desperate spiral of a man in denial about mortality. His HIV announcement forced the world to see the collapse not as comedy, but more like, consequence. For years, his antics were laughed at, but suddenly they looked like the behavior of someone living under a death sentence he couldn't admit publicly. So the jokes soured and sympathy didn't quite arrive, but the laughter certainly had a bitter edge. Through all of this, Martin Sheen remained the quiet, tragic counterpoint. The man didn't look away. He called addiction a family disease, admitted his helplessness, staged interventions, and even prayed for his son. While Charlie self-destructed on camera, Martin stood in the background, dignified and broken. Every mugshot and bizarre interview dragged Martin into the glare. Charlie wasn't just another addict in decline, he was Martin Sheen's son, and that meant the spectacle carried collateral damage for the entire family. So this is where the Nepo-Baby framing sharpens. Nepotism didn't only give Charlie opportunity, it amplified every collapse. Without Martin, Charlie might have been another actor who lost to his demons in relative obscurity. With Martin, his failures became global events, because the Sheen name was a megaphone. It guaranteed that the highs were celebrated louder and the lows were broadcast further. Privilege gave him early access, but it also magnified his implosion until it was impossible to look away. Charlie Sheen was more than a Hollywood burnout, he was a prototype for celebrity culture in the internet age. He showed how nepotism can propel a career and how privilege can insulate bad behavior, until it doesn't. He showed how scandal becomes currency and how quickly that currency devalues. He showed how a father's legacy can elevate a son and also condemn him to implode under scrutiny. His career wasn't destroyed in silence, it was destroyed with a laugh track, a Twitter hashtag, and a billion fucking memes. Today, Charlie Sheen is 8 years sober and survives as a relic of two different eras. He's a reminder of the excess-fueled Hollywood of the 1980s and 1990s, when bad boys were bankable. He's also a blueprint for the internet era, when a celebrity meltdown could turn into viral entertainment overnight. His legacy isn't a film or a performance, it's a meltdown so public, so absurd that it outlived the work that once made him famous. Charlie Sheen had the hits: Platoon, Wall Street, Major League, 2.5 Men. He had the family name, the opportunities, the talent, the platform. What he lacked was discipline, stability, restraint. Nepotism made sure that when he fell, the entire world saw it happen. His story is not only about addiction or ego, it's about how privilege magnifies collapse until it becomes myth. Charlie Sheen turned nepotism's safety net into a trampoline. And when he launched himself off it, the man didn't just fall. He bounced so high the entire world got front row seats to the crash. And before we move on, a quick word from the sponsor of this video. And as always, my friends, I timestamp these motherfuckers for your convenience. But if you do check it out, you know I love you, baby. You know, sometimes life happens right when you need it to. A flat tire, a surprise medical bill. After trying to relive the glory days while playing touch football, only to be reminded that your knees are not 19 anymore. It always feels like life finds a way to empty your wallet. But what if you had a safety net? Well, with today's sponsor, Clover, you finally do. Get instant access to a cash advance up to $250 right when you need it most. Clover is there for groceries, for rent, for that car repair. It's truly a lifesaver. Forget the stress of overdraft fees and payday loans. Clover offers complete transparency. No credit checks, no interest, no hidden fees, ever. Get the peace of mind that comes from true financial control. Click the link in the description so they know I sent you and sign up for Clover today. Your wallet will thank you. Shout out to Clover for sponsoring today's video. And now back to the Nepos, baby. Nicolas Nicolas Cage, not the bees. Nicolas Cage isn't what you'd call a self-made man. He's not exactly a scrappy outsider, not really someone who hustled his way from obscurity to movie stardom through sheer force of talent. He was born into the Coppola dynasty, a Hollywood bloodline so entrenched in film history that you can't throw a camera dolly without hitting one of them. His uncle Francis Ford Coppola made The fucking Godfather and Apocalypse Now. His aunt Talia Shire played Adrian in Rocky, for crying out loud. Even his cousin Sophia would eventually direct Lost in Translation, one of the best films of the early 2000s. Hell, another one of his cousins, Jason Schwartzman, became the face of indie hipster cinema thanks to Wes Anderson. Nicolas Cage never had to knock on the door of Hollywood because he grew up inside the mansion. None of this is to slam him, it's just reality, and what makes Cage so fascinating. Unlike some Nepo-Babies who ride their family name to mediocrity and call it a career, Cage didn't want to just be another Coppola. Nah, he wanted to be something different, something louder, something stranger. It's how he got shit like this. He knew the Coppola name carried prestige, but it also carried baggage. Francis was already a legend, cousin Sophia was being teed up for the director's chair, and Jason was sliding into those cool kid roles. And our boy Cage, though, he wanted none of that. So he ditched the family name early, renaming himself after Marvel's Luke Cage. And shameless plug, we interview the writer of the Luke Cage TV show on BSUP. You should check it out. Link is in the description. After the video, of course. The name switch was a symbolic rejection, saying, "Hey, I'm not Francis Ford's nephew. I'm my own man." Of course, upon reflection, it was cosplay rebellion. Dropping the Coppola name didn't erase the Coppola connections. It just let him play both sides, so he could claim independence while still being cast through the same network of influence. A kind of nepotism in disguise, or more like rebelling with training wheels. Still, Cage had something the other Coppolas didn't. A willingness to be absolutely fucking crazy in front of the camera. Hell, in his earliest roles, he was already a walking headline. For example, in Birdie, he pulled out 2 teeth without anesthesia just to feel the pain of his disfigured Vietnam vet. For Peggy Sue Got Married, he delivered his lines in a bizarre, high-pitched voice that nearly derailed the film, much to the fury of Kathleen Turner and Francis himself. And in Vampire's Kiss, he ate a live cockroach on camera. Not because it was written, but because Cage thought it was the kind of dedication the role demanded. God damn it. None of this was something you'd call safe Hollywood acting. It was bizarrely masochistic improv that should have gotten him blacklisted. Yet, it didn't, because he was a Coppola. The dynasty basically shielded him while the madness defined him. By the late 80s, Cage had completely and utterly carved out a reputation as the unpredictable guy. But, you know, he had a lot of talent. Raising Arizona gave the Coen brothers a chance to showcase his twitchy brilliance. And he turned a bumbling ex-con into a cult-like figure of admiration. And even when the films were small, Cage made them feel like events because you never knew what you were going to get. That unpredictability made him essential. You didn't exactly hire Nicolas Cage with the intent of him giving you what you expect. You hired him to give you the performance no one else would dare. And in a twist almost as bizarre as he was, the industry rewarded the chaos. By the mid-90s, Cage had gone from eating cockroaches to winning an Oscar. Leaving Las Vegas gave him the platform to channel his mania into something tragic and magnetic. His portrayal of an alcoholic screenwriter drinking himself to death was raw and disturbingly believable. So when he took home the Academy Award, it felt like the industry had crowned its next great actor. He really did leave behind the idea of just being Francis Ford Coppola's nephew. He was Nicolas Cage, Best Actor. But, like always, the tale doesn't end there. The Oscar didn't cement him in the pantheon of serious drama, it actually launched him into what I consider the most improbable pivot in Hollywood history. Nicolas Cage, bug-eyed and wiry freakazoid, became the face of American action cinema. The talented weirdo became a star on par with Schwarzenegger and Stallone, with hits like The Rock, Con Air, Face Off, 3 back-to-back-to-back blockbusters where Cage wasn't just acting, he was carrying the genre on his shoulders. It made no fucking sense, but we were there for it. He wasn't built like Stallone or Schwarzenegger, and he wasn't suave like Tom Cruise. He looked more like your chain-smoking uncle you only see during the holidays. But somehow, we, the audience, bought him as an action god. He delivered one-liners about bunnies and boxes with a straight face.
I said, put the bunny back in the box.
Swapped identities with John Travolta with his now typical insanity.
Well, I think you better pull the trigger, because I don't give a fuck. Ready for the
and stormed Alcatraz with Sean Connery. And well, we the people loved it. For a wild stretch of time, Nicolas Cage was printing money. Nepotism might have opened the door, but his willingness to go all in on roles no one else would kept him in the spotlight. But of course, like any good story, came the crash out. Like a true Nepo baby with too much rope, he hung himself financially. Cage's downfall wasn't fueled by scandal or drugs or the usual Hollywood flameouts. Nope, it came by compulsive, deranged spending. Reports rolled in about his 15 houses, 2 European castles, a private island in the Bahamas, fleets of exotic cars. You name it, this dude would buy it. He bought a fucking dinosaur skull at auction for hundreds of thousands of dollars, only to discover it had been stolen from Mongolia and had to hand it back. He even bought shrunken pygmy heads, albino king cobras, a 9-foot-tall burial tomb in New Orleans shaped like a pyramid. His bank statements read like props for one of the shitty action movies he'd eventually star in. It was more than simple eccentricity, it was madness with receipts. Of course, Uncle Sam and the IRS came for him, and Cage owed tens of millions in back taxes. So to pay them off, he started saying yes to everything. And by everything, I mean everything. He went from Oscar glory to conveyor belt of straight-to-DVD trash. Let's list a few. Bangkok Dangerous, Season of the Witch, Trespass, Left Behind. Movies so forgettable most people only saw them when scrolling past on streaming, shaking their heads at how far down Cage was willing to go. It was a career in freefall, but that didn't stop him for shit. He filmed anywhere from 3 to 4 projects a year. Every bad role was a paycheck, meaning another dent in that mountain of debt. Because of his own doing, for nearly 10 years, he lived in cinematic purgatory. He became a punchline with YouTube compilations of his freakouts, becoming the internet's favorite meltdown. Not the bees from the Wicker Man remake became shorthand for washed up overacting. You can't help but cringe.
Oh, no, not the bees! Not the bees!
His once brilliant unpredictability was, at this point, reduced to parody. Yet even here, his legend grew, baby. He wasn't like other stars whose careers nosedive into obscurity. Cage was omnipresent. The man was a disaster you couldn't look away from. He didn't stop working or disappear, no. Instead, he kept pumping out films no matter how low the budget or how ridiculous the script. He turned failure into sheer volume, and the internet, perversely, hilariously, loved him for it. Then, something strange happened. Filmmakers realized Cage wasn't a joke to be laughed at from a distance. In fact, he could still be dynamite if he was handled properly. In 2018, Mandy put him at the center of a psychedelic revenge nightmare, and critics hailed it as Cage unleashed once more. His success that was once embarrassing was suddenly visionary again when framed by the right director. Then came Pig in 2021, a quiet, restrained character study where Cage played a reclusive truffle hunter mourning his stolen pig. There wasn't any screaming, there weren't any bug-eyed freakouts, just haunting, somber acting that reminded audiences he could still be brilliant, and critics called it his best work in decades. Finally, the unbearable weight of massive talent landed in 2022. Cage played himself, parodying his failures, his reputation, his very identity. It was part comedy, part meta-commentary, all parts therapy session. Cage had stopped running from his image, and this was him monetizing it. It was great, but more an artistic return than full comeback. He's not headlining billion-dollar franchises or topping box office charts anymore, but it was a resurrection of his reputation. He went from meme to cult icon, from embarrassment to legend of chaos. Even now, with Francis Ford Coppola dragging that piece of shit megalopolis across the finish line last year, Cage himself hovers around, like a reminder that the Coppola clan is still feeding the industry both prestige and spectacle. Cage is more than just part of the dynasty, he's its wildest mutation. And like other people in this video, Nicolas Cage is none of that without nepotism. Cage can drop the Coppola name all he wants, but he can never escape the fact that his career began with family connections. Nepotism gave him a platform to be weird in front of the right people. Nepotism let him fail upward long enough to win an Oscar. Nepotism ensured that even when he was broke and embarrassing himself in straight-to-DVD garbage, the industry would still give him chance after chance. But Cage isn't just a Nepo baby. He's the ultimate Hollywood Nepo experiment. Because what happens when you give someone born into a dynasty total creative freedom and unlimited second chances? Well, guess what? You get Nicolas Cage. Brilliance, collapse, reinvention, just total chaos turned into cult mythology. And where is he today? Well, he sits in a strange middle ground. He's not a mainstream A-lister, but he's not washed up either. He's celebrated for being exactly what he is. Unpredictable, excessive, ridiculous, and occasionally almost accidentally brilliant. He's the guy who can headline a $2 million thriller one month and win raves in an art house drama the next. Without the Coppola bloodline, Nicolas Cage might have just been another oddball actor lost in the shuffle, a lunatic eating cockroaches in downtown theater productions, but that's not his story. He has the bloodline, and with it, he became Hollywood's most entertaining disaster. A man who squandered fortunes and careers only to reinvent himself as his own fucking genre. Because nepotism doesn't guarantee stability, it guarantees attention. And that attention, no matter how toxic, is what kept Nicolas Cage alive in the industry. Strip away the Coppola connection, and he's just a broke eccentric with castles, cobras, unpaid taxes. With it, he's Nicolas fucking Cage. The only Nepo baby who torched his inheritance, sold his dignity, and still came crawling back into legend by playing the only role he was born for, himself. Robert Downey Jr. I am Iron Man. Like other people in this video, Robert Downey Jr. never had to audition for Hollywood. He was born into it. Molded by it. Practically raised in the shadows of sound stages and Manhattan lofts clouded in smoke. His father, Robert Downey Sr., was a counterculture filmmaker with a reputation for doing things his way, and his mother, Elsie Ford, was an actress, so not exactly a normal childhood. Downey Jr. was cast in his father's films as a kid and given bit parts in underground movies before most children even understood what a camera is. Not exactly opportunity. No, that was nepotism built into his DNA. Downey wasn't chasing Hollywood, he was marinating in it. But hey, we all love a fine steak, right? Because Downey wasn't some untalented hack who didn't earn his rep, but like so many, he definitely was a victim of the machine. That kind of upbringing doesn't exactly produce well-adjusted adults. It actually produces someone like Downey. Precocious and charming, and spiraling before he ever stood a chance. His father might have put him in movies, but reportedly he might have introduced him to drugs too, before he even hit puberty. Certainly not the best parenting. It was something more akin to sabotage, dressed up as bohemia. Downey's adolescence was a blur of permissiveness and dysfunction. Growing up thinking excess was normal, that cocaine and chaos were as much part of Hollywood as scripts and cameras. It set the tone for Downey's entire trajectory, talent and destruction walking hand in hand. Nepotism had given him the launch pad and the family chaos built the bomb. From the moment he hit the industry as an adult, Downey was impossible to ignore. He joined SNL in 1985, during what many consider its weakest season, and stood out not because he was polished, but because he was restless. From there, he quickly became associated with the Brat Pack orbit in the 1980s. Maybe not quite part of the Molly Ringwald Emilio Estevez core, but close enough to bask in its glow. In films like Weird Science, The Pickup Artist, and especially Less Than Zero, Downey radiated a kind of dangerous charm. His portrayal of Julian, a wealthy kid sinking into addiction in Less Than Zero, was devastating, mostly because it didn't feel like acting, but more like a prophecy. Audiences and critics alike could see the magnetism, the undeniable spark of someone who could command the screen. The hype was certainly real. Here was a young actor with the looks, chops, and family pedigree to be Hollywood's next great thing. And for a while, it looked like he'd cash in on that promise. His turn in Chaplin in 1992 was staggering. He more than imitated Chaplin's walk and mannerisms. He embodied the man, finding humor and melancholy in the same breath. The Academy took notice, earning Downey his first Oscar nomination. He was barely 30 and already being hailed as a once-in-a-generation actor. Nepotism may have gotten him in the door, but at this point, his sheer talent was forcing everyone to admit he belonged there, poised to take his place in the pantheon. But, like always, came the big bang, his absolute implosion. He could easily have been part of my Celebrity Self-Destruct series rather than a portrait as a Nepo baby. The 1990s and early 2000s weren't kind to Downey, as a never-ending reel of mugshots, arrests, and court appearances took center stage rather than his talent. He was drowning in drugs, ranging from the usual vices of booze and pills to heroin and coke. He was arrested for possession, arrested for trespassing, arrested for fucking weapons charges. One of the most infamous incidents involved him breaking into a neighbor's house and passing out in a child's fucking bed, for crying out loud. He was in and out of everything from jail to rehab to probation hearings. With all that going on and disintegrating his personal life, his career went right along with it. The funny thing is, people like Downey and Sheen would still get scripts because Hollywood loves to encourage and recover their addicts. A comeback story is great, but in Downey's case, they actually couldn't hire him because he was uninsurable. Studios might have wanted him, but directors were iffy on his hire because he couldn't be trusted to show up. He initially had a huge comeback with Ally McBeal, the major TV role he'd rumored to have gotten while in jail, of course, but he was fired after yet another arrest. The wonder kind had become a liability. For most actors, that would have been the end. Hollywood loves a comeback star, but it has to be somewhat safe. At the very least, hireable. The phrase uninsurable is a death sentence in the industry. It means the money people won't back you, the studio won't cover you, and no one wants to risk millions on a performer who might vanish into a crack binge halfway through filming. Fortunately for Downey, he wasn't most actors. Nepotism did its thing. He was Robert Downey Sr.'s son, an heir to Hollywood counterculture, and he had a Rolodex of people who remembered him at his best. He had goodwill stored up in the bank of nepotism, and it kept him alive in the industry long after anyone else would have been gone. He might have burned bridge after bridge, but there was always someone, somewhere, willing to give him one more chance. That's the paradox of his career. Nepotism gave him the privilege to fail publicly, spectacularly, without total exile. It gave him the safety net to implode in full view of the world and still get offered roles when he emerged from jail. But nepotism alone doesn't explain what came next, because after years of spiraling, Downey finally did the one thing no one expected him to do. He got his fucking act together. The first hints came with The Singing Detective and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang in the early 2000s. Shane Black's offbeat noir comedy was a perfect test case. Could Downey still deliver? The short answer is yes. The better answer, he did more than that. He lit up the screen with the same mix of wit and danger that had defined his early career, except now it was sharpened by years of pain and self-awareness. He was still charming and magnetic, but now he had a layer of lived-in wariness that made him even more compelling. He was, finally, a grown-up. A real actor. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang wasn't box office gold, but it was proof of life. And he stole the show in the underrated and now forgotten Keanu Reeves thriller A Scanner Darkly, where he got to play a cracked out junkie that became the most memorable part of a fantastic movie. Then David Fincher cast him in Zodiac, letting him trade banter with Jake Gyllenhaal and Mark Ruffalo as a hard-drinking reporter. Once again, he nailed it. And because of that, Hollywood noticed, and what would become the biggest of all, Marvel noticed. He was cast as Iron Man, even though he was seen as a risk still. And when Iron Man hit theaters in 2008, Robert Downey Jr. didn't just star in it, he was it. Having him as Tony Stark was either a stroke of genius or a last-ditch Hail Mary, depending on who you ask. Stark was a billionaire playboy with a self-destructive streak who had to find redemption. Downey was a Hollywood prince with a self-destructive streak who had to find redemption. In the role of Stark, the blurry line between character and actor completely vanished, and the result was lightning in a bottle. Downey's improvisational style, wit, and volatility all poured into Stark, turning Iron Man from a comic book B-lister into the cornerstone of the biggest empire in cinema history. The film's success launched the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and Downey became its beating heart. Over the next decade, he was more than playing a role, he was carrying a franchise on top of a franchise. The writing of MCU characters mimicked his cadence, borrowed his charisma, and built its tone around his quippy arrogance. Tony Stark was Robert Downey Jr., and Robert Downey Jr. was Tony Stark. It was the greatest comeback in modern Hollywood history. A man once written off as a hopeless addict became the face of the most successful film franchise ever. And unlike other Nepo-Babies who coast on family connections, Downey didn't just have a comeback, he became bigger than literally anyone else in history. What makes his redemption arc so powerful, and frankly so cool, is that it never tries to erase the past. Downey didn't hide his addiction or rewrite the story. His smirks and winks on screen carried the weight of someone who had been to hell and barely crawled out. His triumph felt earned because it wasn't just PR spin, and audiences felt that. They rooted for him not just as Iron Man, but as he was. As Robert Downey Jr. Every Marvel film he appeared in was another reminder that he'd escaped his own destruction. His downfall gave his comeback authenticity, and authenticity is something Hollywood simply can't fake. It's true that nepotism paved the way. It might have kept him in circulation. Without it, maybe he would have been forgotten after his 10th mugshot. But what's awesome is that's not the whole story. What he did with his comeback is what's important. He didn't coast off his name. Instead, he was putting in the work, showing up and reinventing himself as the biggest movie star on earth. Nepotism may have given him the first act, but it was his resilience, timing, and discipline that delivered the finale. He even proved he was more than a franchise name when he won that well-deserved Oscar for his role in Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. The dude can literally do anything. So he does. Indeed, Robert Downey Jr. sits at the top of the Hollywood food chain. He's one of the wealthiest actors alive, a man whose face is synonymous with Marvel's billion-dollar empire. It's why he was the coveted piece to reignite the franchise with his casting as Dr. Doom. Yes, he's playing multiple roles in the MCU at this point because, like I said, he's the MCU's beating heart. He can pick and choose projects, dabble in producing, and enjoy a cultural stature few actors ever reach. He went from jail cells and probation hearings hearings to Disney boardrooms and Oscar campaigns. He's a walking contradiction in the best possible way. The Nepo baby who wasted everything and still came back stronger than anyone ever has. Sure, if you strip away the family dynasty, maybe Downey's just another tragic actor whose career ends in a forgotten obituary. But with it, he became fucking Iron Man. Unlike so many of his peers, his comeback isn't a hollow branding exercise. It's the rare story in Hollywood where privilege met ruin, ruin met survival, and survival turned into legend. Robert Downey Jr. isn't just a Nepo baby who got lucky. He's the one who finally lived up to the myth. Drew Barrymore. Bah. Like Downey Jr., Drew was more than born into Hollywood. She was born into one of its ruling families, the Barrymores, a family that had been acting royalty since the damn silent era. Her grandfather, John Barrymore, was called the Great Profile, a Shakespearean titan who became one of the defining actors of his generation. Her great-uncle Lionel starred in Grand Hotel and It's a Wonderful Life. Her great-aunt Ethel was sheer Broadway supremacy. The Barrymore name was already carved into Hollywood's foundation long before Drew was born in 1975. She didn't just inherit opportunity like other people in this video, she inherited a brand because the Barrymores were a flat-out dynasty. And fortunately, or unfortunately, that dynasty came with two things: access and dysfunction. Drew's father, John Drew Barrymore, was a question mark in human form, a man whose acting career dissolved under the weight of alcohol, drugs, and unreliability. Her mother, Jade, wasn't exactly the portrait of stability either, and so Drew's childhood was less about nurturing and more about exposure. She was being taken to Studio 54 before she was old enough for grade school, a place so fucked up they made a movie about it. When your playdates involve nightclubs and your bedtime stories are written in cocaine dust, your odds of becoming a well-adjusted adult are already shot. But this was the Barrymore way. The name gave you the spotlight, and the spotlight burned you alive. By the time she was 6, Drew was a child actor, or more specifically, she was America's child actor. Steven Spielberg cast her in E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and her performance as the pig-tailed, wide-eyed Gertie was so effortlessly charming that she stole scenes from an alien puppet and an entire cast of adults. Overnight, she became a cultural fixture. She was on talk shows, magazine covers, you name it. Nepotism definitely gave her the role, but charisma made her unforgettable. So it goes though, fame that intense at that young an age is a loaded gun. Hollywood loves a child star, creepy as that is, but it also loves to watch them collapse, and Drew fell apart faster and harder than most. By just 9 years old, she was chain smoking. By 11, she was drinking heavily. By 12, she was on cocaine. By 13, she was in rehab. By 14, she attempted suicide. This was more than teenage rebellion, it was a public unraveling. Her mother, more enabler than guardian, was bringing her to parties instead of protecting her from them. Drew simply wasn't being parented. What they were doing was marketing her. She was the Barrymore brand, turned into an exploited tabloid headline before she even had a learner's permit. And yet, even at her lowest, nepotism cushioned the blow. Drew was banished from her mother's custody at 14, legally emancipated so she could live on her own. Most kids in that situation would simply vanish into tragedy, but Drew was a Barrymore. She had a name that meant something in Hollywood, even if it meant scandal. She became the ultimate symbol of child star burnout, the example everyone pointed to when warning about the dangers of fame. That kind of notoriety is still currency in Hollywood, and so, like anyone with a brain, Drew cashed in on it. She wasn't finished. Nah, she was just rebooting. The 1990s became her reinvention decade. No one was offering her prestige roles, but she leaned into her notoriety and turned it into a persona. She posed for Playboy at 19. Steven Spielberg sent her a note pleading her to cover up, but, that didn't stop her. She flashed David Letterman on national television. She developed a reputation as the quirky, unfiltered wild child who wasn't ashamed of her past. And she had sex with Tom Green. In an era before Instagram branding, Drew was her own brand. The girl who had lived through hell and came out smiling. Hollyweird, the place that had written her off as a disaster, suddenly found her marketable again. Surprise, surprise. She was damaged goods, but damaged goods with a famous name and undeniable pizzazz. That pizzazz became bankable, a commodity. She started landing roles that leaned into her mix of sweetness and danger. She stole scenes in Poison Ivy, where her wide-eyed innocence cloaked something darker. And who can forget when she cemented herself as an icon in Scream, where her shocking early death became one of horror's most memorable twists. And then she found her sweet spot: romantic comedies. The Wedding Singer paired her with Adam Sandler, and suddenly Drew Barrymore wasn't a fallen child star or a scandal magnet. She was America's quirky, lovable rom-com queen. Never Been Kissed and 50 First Dates, another Sandler flick, cemented it. She transformed from the industry's worrisome story of child stardom gone wrong into one of its most reliable leading ladies. But Drew went on to become more than just an actress. She became a producer too. With her company Flower Films, she first co-produced the hit Charlie's Angels, which turned into a box office juggernaut. Flower Films also backed Donnie Darko, the cult classic that made Jake Gyllenhaal a star. Drew was doing way more than just cashing in on her name at that point. She was trying to shape the industry from behind the camera. That's the thing about nepotism. It gets you in the door, but it also gives you the network, the leverage, the confidence to expand. Drew had been on set since she was a toddler, and by her 30s, she was running them. And she kept reinventing herself. After the rom-com and production peak, she moved into directing with Whip It, showing she could helm projects as well as star in them. In the 2010s, she pivoted again, embracing lifestyle branding, makeup lines, and eventually daytime television with the Drew Barrymore show, shitty as it is now. She managed to turn her messy, chaotic history into an asset. And the talk show Drew wasn't the pigtailed Gertie or the wild child Drew or the rom-com heroine. She was the survivor, the woman who could cry with a guest 1 minute and laugh out her childhood insanity the next. She built a persona out of being unpolished, candid, and approachable, or basically the anti-Ellen, the star who made her flaws part of her charm. That's why Drew Barrymore remains beloved and some might say cringe. But the cool thing about it is she didn't escape her past or deny it. She turned it into part of her identity, reframing it as resilience instead of scandal. Hollywood forgives a lot when you're born into a dynasty, but Drew actually gave them a reason to forgive her. She worked and kept coming back. She embraced the mess instead of hiding it. Nepotism gave her the spotlight, but survival instinct kept her intact. Still, we can't ignore the truth. The Barrymore name guaranteed she'd have opportunities most kids never get. It guaranteed she could fail in public a dozen times and still have a path back. It guaranteed that her teen addiction became tabloid fodder instead of permanent exile. Nepotism didn't just help Drew Barrymore, it flat out saved her. The industry loves to point to her as a redemption story, but it's also a story about how dynasties protect their own. Today, Drew is less a movie star and more a cultural fixture. She's not dominating the box office, but that's really because she doesn't have to. She's a television presence, a name that's woven into the fabric of Hollywood itself, whether we like it or not. Like the others on this list, if you strip away the dynasty, maybe Barrymore is just another forgotten child star who overdosed before 15. But she became a woman who turned addiction, scandal, and reinvention into a 4-decade career. Whether you like her or not, that's pretty impressive. Nepotism doesn't always guarantee greatness, but in Drew's case, it guaranteed she had the chance to keep trying until she found it. She turned collapse into currency and made dysfunction her brand. She's the Barrymore heir who proved you can torch your childhood, snort your adolescence, and still show up smiling on daytime TV. Hollywood's most chaotic Nepo-Baby, selling forgiveness one reinvention at a time. So in conclusion, Hollywood's obsession with nepotism isn't just about propping up mediocre talent. It's about building scaffolding around a collapsing building and pretending the structure is sound. Nepo-Babies don't simply rise. They are suspended, strung up by family ties, studio favors, an industry desperate to recycle surnames like their brand logos. But the cruel irony is that the same system that inflates them also makes their downfall more spectacular. A shooting star indeed, they don't fall in silence. They plummet under the hot glare of every camera, every headline, every snarky late-night joke. And because their fame was never entirely their own, the industry props them up even as they implode. Like a puppet show where the strings are frayed, but no one dares cut them. Sometimes, like Robert Downey Jr. or Drew Barrymore, it works out. Other times, like Sheen or Cage, it's a little less cut and dry. Nepotism doesn't prevent collapse, it just slows it down, cushioning every misstep until the crash becomes inevitable. And when the crash does come, it's not a private tragedy, but a public demolition, with the family names stamped all over the rubble. That's why Hollywood keeps playing this rigged game. The spectacle of propping up the often unworthy is only rivaled by the spectacle of watching them fail, and nothing sells like a famous surname in flames. Thanks for joining me on this adventure of portrait painting on Hollyweird. While it's a bit celebrity self-destruct adjacent, it's something I've been wanting to do for a while. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a comment with some names you'd like to see in the follow-up. Before I go, I just want to shout out everyone who supports me over on Patreon. See here. Over there, I release reviews and video essays you can't find anywhere else, as well as scripts of videos so you can see the process we go through. If you're interested, make sure to check it out and get your name in a video. Thanks to everyone who supports me. I genuinely appreciate every single one of you guys. And I've never asked this, but 70% of my viewers aren't subscribed, so if you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I also have a second channel called Cynic After Dark, where I do even more full-length movie reviews and video essays, like a deep dive film comparison between The Dark Knight and The Batman, or reviewing recent films like Black Phone 2. And yes, actual positive reviews end up there as well. Find it in the link in the description, where you can also find the Patreon link as well. Till next time, GG's.